New discoveries are being made all the time. Sometimes they describe new and disturbing stories about the past that have been long forgotten. And sometimes we receive warnings of the unpleasant future that is yet to come. In this week's episode, we are going to discuss some of the most interesting and troubling revelations from the first half of 2020. Modern chewing gum was first developed in the 1860s. John Colgan, a Kentucky pharmacist, mixed sugar with an extract from the balsam tree and started manufacturing the first product which resembles the chewing gum we enjoy today. Many of these early versions used chicle, a natural gum substance that was originally brought to the U.S. from Mexico. The concept of chewing gum existed long before John Colgan started filing patents. Humans have been using other substances as chewing gum since prehistoric times. One common version that has been found at various sites by archaeologists is made of birch pitch. The bark of a birch tree would be placed above a fire, and the liquid that emerged would be captured. When this dried, it could be used as a gum or an adhesive. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen were excavating a site in Denmark and found a piece of birch pitch chewing gum from 5,700 years ago. This isn't very unusual, but what they did with it is certainly new. They managed to extract a complete human genome from this ancient piece of gum. It is the first time an ancient person's genome has been sequenced from anything other than bone. The DNA analysis showed that a woman chewed the gum, and she was more closely related to hunter-gatherers from mainland Europe than her modern counterparts in Scandinavia. They were also able to obtain microbial DNA from that gum, which allowed the scientists to determine what pathogens the long-dead woman was carrying. One of them was the Epstein-Barr virus, which is known to cause mononucleosis, sometimes called the kissing disease. Additionally, they found DNA from ducks and hazelnuts, which presumably indicates the woman's diet included these items. Researchers hope that by performing more analysis on the extracted DNA, they can understand what pathogens killed our ancestors and how they evolved over time. Perhaps we will be better able to fight disease in the future as a result of this effort. And then again, it may just reinforce that we are completely at the mercy of nature. Before we continue, it's time for a history quiz. If you have been watching our channel, then you should know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, then we encourage you to watch older episodes and learn more. Who is the doctor that first started using insulin to treat diabetic patients? Is it Norman G. Baker? Perhaps Bransby Cooper? Or was it Frederick Banting? Take a few seconds to consider your choice. The correct answer is Frederick Banting, who first began treating patients with insulin in 1922. Norman G. Baker was a radio DJ who sold fake cancer cures. He wasn't really a doctor. Bransby Cooper was a doctor in the 19th century, but died decades before insulin was discovered. As you probably know, climate change is a problem affecting the world today, and it is expected to get much worse by the end of the century. But what if the claims made by climate scientists in the past are too optimistic? Previous studies of climate data suggested that by the end of the 20th century, some places in the tropics and subtropics may become too hot and humid for people to live there. Colin Raymond, a student at Columbia University, came to a stunning conclusion during his PhD research. He was one of several authors that presented these findings. Most studies of climate data tend to take an average of temperatures over large areas and over a long period of time. Raymond took a different approach and looked at specific places and specific times. What Raymond found was that extreme heat is already happening years ahead of schedule. It just isn't showing up in the averages yet. He used weather data from between 1979 and 2017. During that time, extreme heat and humidity events doubled. India, Australia, Mexico, United Arab Emirates, China, and the southeastern United States all experienced these events. Most of them tended to happen near coastlines where evaporating seawater provided much of the moisture. When the humidity reaches high levels, then sweating no longer provides a cooling effect, and people who can't use other strategies to lower their body temperature can die. For more advanced countries, people may be able to survive the events by staying in air-conditioned buildings or using running water to cool themselves. But essential activities, such as agriculture, may be severely impacted. And poorer countries with limited access to air conditioners and running water may have a large number of fatalities. The unfortunate implication is that we don't have several decades to deal with the problem. It is happening right now, and it is only going to get worse. How will the Earth support billions of people when they can't survive near the equator? At this time, nobody knows. We have known for some time that agriculture was discovered around 12,800 years ago. We have also known that a cosmic event, most likely a comet impact, was responsible for causing several animals to go extinct, such as woolly mammoths. Some cultures, such as the Clovis culture in North America, also disappeared. A site named Abu Huraira on the Euphrates River in Syria shows where one group of people settled down and began planting crops. A recent re-evaluation of the evidence has led to a new discovery. The cereals, grains, walls, and animal bones that were present were splashed with melt glass. This is a type of glass which is formed from very high temperatures. That could be created today with nuclear weapons, but people living over 12,000 years ago thankfully didn't have access to that technology. The existence of this glass demonstrates clearly that the settlement experienced a high-energy, high-velocity impact. The most likely event is that a comet broke up in the atmosphere and fragments exploded in the sky. Combined with evidence from other parts of the world, it seems almost certain that many animals and people were killed all over the Earth during this time. Most people around the world experienced some environmental changes after the alleged comet exploded. But the people who lived in Abu Huraira saw their entire village destroyed. On that cheerful note, it's time for another history quiz. Who was the first U.S. president to sign a public health care initiative into law? Was it Franklin D. Roosevelt? After all, he helped create Social Security and talked openly about universal health care. Maybe John Adams, the second president of the United States, had the honor of doing this. How about Richard Nixon? He did declare a war on poverty after all. Take a few moments to consider your choice. The answer is John Adams. The first public health care law taxed sailors so that they could be provided with prepaid health care. He signed this into law in 1798. Whether we change the climate on our own or the universe sends objects through space to kill us, it seems that the comfort we find on Earth is a temporary event at best. But it isn't all bad news for our species. Well, maybe it will be in the future. But one new discovery from the past is encouraging, from a certain point of view. The Toba supervolcano erupted in Indonesia roughly 74,000 years ago. It is believed to have caused winter-like conditions for 6 to 7 years, and it cooled the entire Earth for about 1,000 years. Researchers have believed for some time that this nearly caused Homo sapiens to become extinct. Supposedly, people evolved complicated social and economic strategies to survive, then populated Europe and Asia when conditions improved. Some findings in India show that our species might be better at surviving than expected. Stone tools found in India demonstrate that people were living there before and after the eruption. They kept creating tools and apparently devised new survival strategies. Whatever did happen after the eruption, these people survived just fine. Scientists today think that perhaps the volcano did not affect climate as severely as originally thought. Nonetheless, early hunter-gatherer groups appeared to be fairly resilient in the face of sudden climate change. Finally, we end this week with a discovery that demonstrates what happens if people do not manage natural resources properly. The Norse settled Greenland around 985 AD. They lived there for centuries, thriving until disappearing in the 1400s and leaving only ruins. Recent findings give a compelling new reason for that event. For centuries, almost all of the ivory traded in Europe came from walruses. They were hunted in seas that could only be accessed from Greenland. This ivory was used to create luxury items, such as crucifixes or chess pieces. Over time, the ivory that was being sent to Europe seemed to come from ever smaller animals, who were often female. It appears the settlers in Greenland had to go farther and farther to find their ivory as the animals became more scarce. Starting in the 1200s, trade became increasingly globalized, and Europe started receiving much of its ivory from elephants instead. Since the settlers in Greenland had to trade ivory for the materials they needed to sustain their colonies, it became more and more difficult to survive. According to Dr. James H. Barrett from the University of Cambridge's Department of Archaeology, Greenland might have been abandoned because of a combination of factors. They depleted local resources by overhunting and experienced economic hardship by being unable to trade. Finally, the climate changed in the 1300s and cooled considerably during what is called the Little Ice Age. Ultimately, the Norse could not adapt to conditions in Greenland and were forced to abandon it. Ancient microbes, future climate change, exploding comets, supervolcanoes, and walrus hunting. Each of these tells us something about our past and warns of events in our future. Will humanity be able to adapt? Or will we ultimately fail to adapt to changing conditions? Please let us know what you think in the comments. And as always, thanks for joining us on Bad Things in History.